Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Grid Live Encore. I'm Ben Schneider, joined as always by Brandon Crosland. Brandon, how's it going?
All right, Ben. Hope everything's going well with you. And we are on another edition of Grid Live Encore. Oh, it was Talladega, all right.
Yes, it certainly was Talladega. Talladega certainly lived up to the hype of the chaos and controversy that we almost always see there, and we will get into that here in just a moment. But first, as always, want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and our newest one, Matthew. Thank you all so much. Your support means the world to us. It's what allows us to continue to do what we love here at Grid Network. And as you can see, we have some ambitious goals for 2024 to get to the track on a more regular basis. So any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet here. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can visit Buy Me a Coffee in the description box below as well. And of course, follow us on all of our social media platforms so that you are always aware of what we're doing here at Grid Network and whenever we host a new show or upload a new video. Now, Brandon, I think we have to start before we get into the finish and who won the Truck Series race. We have to start with what everybody's talking about and what we could hear an update on in the next 24 to 48 hours or so regarding any penalties that might be coming from that. Matt Crafton and Nick Sanchez were involved in just a little bit of an altercation in the garage area following the conclusion of Saturday's Truck Series race. Now, they have both released, or Crafton has released a statement as well as Sanchez's mother on his behalf. This is what Crafton had to say on his Facebook page and what he also posted to all of his social media platforms. Here is what wasn't caught on video. First, let's address the sucker punch. Before the camera started rolling, I approached Nick and said, "Hey." When he turned around, I said, "What the?" To which he looked right at me and threatened me. That is when it all went to hell. I had his attention, words were exchanged, all before anything physical took place, so I did not sucker punch the guy. There may not be video, but there were plenty of eyewitnesses. Second, what people don't take into account is that he all but sucker punched me at 200 miles per hour. The way he pushed my truck gave me no ability to get out of a situation, and he was told multiple times during that race the way he was pushing people was going to cause a wreck and going to get people hurt. There was a consistent pattern of certain drivers having a lack of respect on the track, and it was time for someone to say something. Am I proud that it got physical? No. But last time I checked, everyone on that track is a grown adult. If a man looks at me and threatens me, I'm going to react, especially when tempers are already flared from being wrecked on the track. I apologize to my team, my sponsors and partners, my family, and the NASCAR community for the negativity and for taking attention away from a good day of racing at Talladega. Now, as there often are, there are two sides to this story. This is what Nick Sanchez's mother wrote on her Facebook page. "Thank you to everyone for all the calls and texts after yesterday's race. Nick is doing good. We all really appreciate your concern and feel your love. For those who don't know what exactly happened, after the race, Nick and his PR right-hand lady, Christy, were walking next to each other back to his hauler. Renee and I were about 10 steps behind them. Then in a flash, another driver literally came out of nowhere. We think he was hiding behind some tires. Then tapped Nick on his shoulder from behind. When Nick turned his face to see who it was, he then sucker punched Nick. Didn't say a word, no confrontation, just flat out blindsided him. The driver had already changed out of his fire suit into plain clothes to blend in with everyone else. Obviously, he was waiting for Nick to walk by. He had it planned. Like Nick said, it was a cheap shot. Anyone who knows Nick knows he's not an aggressor and would never do that to another driver or anyone else, but he didn't even have a chance to defend himself. As a parent, the last thing you expect to see is someone assault and attack your son right in front of you. It's hard to put into words. Sickening is an understatement. I don't know what else to say. I'm still shaken up and extremely sad. This was all because of an on-track incident which happens all the time. That's racing. After watching the video, most people are stating it wasn't Nick's fault. Regardless of whose fault, to not even come up to Nick and talk about it and have a discussion is so classless and cowardly, especially coming from a 47-year-old veteran driver who should be a role model. Yes, a 47-year-old taking a cheap shot at Nick. Brandon, I know you certainly shared some thoughts in our private chat and before we came on the air here. What are your overall opinions on what happened on track and then in the garage area, the subsequent altercation between Matt Crafton and Nick Sanchez?
Listen, Ben, I've never really been, just on a personal aside, never really been a fan of fighting in the sport. Just period. Doesn't appeal to me very much. Did I like 1979's And There's a Fight? Yeah, I did. Just a little bit. I don't know why I like that one, but it's just an iconic moment. But I think there's a difference between those iconic fights and the ones where it's just, okay, why? It's a real head scratcher. And there's so many different sources we have for this. But what really bugs me is we don't really see Matt Crafton anywhere in that video. At least I can't. There's claims that he took his fire suit off and he's now in his street clothes so he can kind of blend in. And it's just so many variables going on this, man. I mean, it's not immediately after the race. It was apparently like an hour or so, or some good amount of elapsed time after the checkered flag that we had this happen. So tempers already had their chance to flare down. So it just doesn't look good for Matt Crafton. Again, being a 47-year-old and a big veteran of the sport, of the series, multi-champion, and coming in and finding this guy. It's equally not as good for a 22-year-old to say he's going to explicit murder you at Homestead multiple times, and the blood all over his face. And what I heard from after the morning drive on Sirius XM, I'm sorry, I forget what Larry Mack's show is called, but could you help me on that Larry Mack show with
Daniel Trotta?
Daniel Trotta, yeah.
I usually only listen to Dave Moody's show on my drive home. I'm not sure.
Well,
I know exactly what you're talking about, but
right. Well, anyway, someone out there knows. Anyway, Danielle shared that what really took it all into perspective for me is she mentioned one of her friends who is just in the stick and ball world of sports, not related to NASCAR. They heard about this incident and they were like, what's going on over there? What's wrong with these guys? You know, people on the outside looking in, that's just it just puts a big smear on on NASCAR as a whole, and also on Gamebridge, and also on Nick Sanchez. On track, thank you, Matthew, from behind the mic. Yeah, she explained that this morning. You can go back and listen to that. But that was a real puncher for me on this whole topic. And then just going back to Nick Sanchez, I'm going to explicitly murder you at Homestead multiple times. Sure, you could say that in driver speak that means he's going to dump him at Homestead, but actually, if any other human being says that to somebody out loud and it's on video, that's premeditated murder. That's, I'm going to kill you at place. Like, I hope they both get the accurate amount of consequences and suspension or fine or whatever they've got to do. I know they got to look back at precedent. I know they got to look at all the evidence that they want to look at, but I don't think that the big takeaway I had on Saturday was there's no good guy here. Don't think for a minute I think either of these guys is on the right side and the other one's at fault. It's both a despicable thing from both sides. And also I saw this other bit from Sean Orna on Twitter. Don't know if this is confirmed or not, but he said, and I quote, Sanchez admitted fault for the wreck over the radio the lap after, so anyone blaming Crafton for this is just delusional. And also he said, quote, this wreck sent someone to the hospital. Crafton has every right to be mad, not to mention Sanchez has been a wrecking ball all season long. Of course, that's not a reference to anything factual. That's just his opinion. But the fact that Sanchez allegedly admitted fault for the wreck over the radio the lap after, I decided to screenshot that because that was a different source for me to take things into account. But just baffled by this overall. In closing, baffled by this and not happy with either one of them. It's an eyesore on the sport, and it's just despicable.
I believe he said "my bad" over the radio.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe I saw a tweet that was live tweeting during the race. He came over the radio and said that. So that would fall in the line with that. Matthew Owens here in the chat room saying, "I'm sorry, but as usual, it was everyone else's fault but Matt's." You know, and Matthew, I know you and I have this discussion as well. Anyone who watches this show regularly knows that I have repeatedly praised Matt Crafton for his longevity and the career, but he's had. He's a 3-time champion of the sport, a 15-time winner in the Truck Series. As far as I'm concerned, he deserves Hall of Fame consideration whenever he decides to hang up the helmet. His consecutive start streak, if you want to put it into perspective, it started before his current ThorSport teammate Haley Deegan was even born. That's how long he's been a truck lifer. That's how long he's been in this series. That's how long he has been the face of a national touring division in this sport.
It's like 2000 or something, right?
Yeah, the 2000 season finale. That's the race before, the penultimate race of 2000. That's the last time Crafton missed a truck race before he made his debut. I mean, it's something that I don't think we talk about often enough. When it comes, like Jeff Gordon's streak gets a lot of attention from Ricky Rudd's before that. I mean, we got to talk about what Matt Crafton's done in the truck series. It's just phenomenal. And I am so, I mean, Brandon, I don't disagree with you. I share your anger. I share your frustration. But I don't know how much energy I have for anger and frustration because all of my emotions, all of my energy is consumed with disappointment. I am so disappointed that this, first of all, that it happened between any two drivers, but in particular, that it happened with Matt Crafton. Matt Crafton is somebody who should be the last person you're expecting to get involved in something like this. He should be, as Sanchez's mother wrote in her Facebook post, and I will, in fairness, admit that I think both of them presented their arguments and their side, and made their case and maybe both brought up some decent points. And, we'll see. NASCAR will take all that evidence and everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But from what we have heard from the eyewitnesses, it is a terrible look for somebody in his mid to late 40s who has been around this sport longer than Nick Sanchez has been alive to do that to, I mean, no incident on the track should be bad enough to justify blooding somebody's face and potentially breaking his nose. I don't know exactly what the extent of Nick's injuries are. Again, I'm sure we'll figure that all out in the coming weeks before Homestead. But I will just say this. If this is how Crafton's streak ends with a suspension, I can't say I'm going to be heartbroken over it. No. It's going to be incredibly disappointing that would be how the streak goes out. But I don't think a suspension would be unjustified here. I know that NASCAR hasn't typically, and again, we'll talk about the precedent here. And, we had this discussion on the show last year after Vegas with Bubba Wallace. I predicted that NASCAR would not give Bubba Wallace a suspension because they had not stepped in for intentional wrecks like that in the past before, at least not on a consistent basis. But credit to NASCAR, they did step in. They gave him a one-race suspension, and then when Chase Elliott did something similar this year, they held firm to their precedent. Even though Chase Elliott's the most popular driver, they gave him a one-race suspension for that. Yeah. I will say this, at the bare minimum, what Crafton and Sanchez did was in the garage area, not at 200 miles an hour with their cars. So I will say that if you give Crafton, and even Sanchez as well, to your point, Brandon, because I don't think those comments are going to go over too well, if you give them a suspension for physical and verbal abuse outside the car, I think that's fine. I think that's justified personally. But I think intentionally right rear hooking somebody at 180 miles an hour, I think that's a 3-race suspension now at the very least. You're telling me that a discussion gone wrong outside the car that leads to some unpleasant things and unpleasant images, that's worth the same as, Kyle Petty made this point on NBC last year as well. If a crew member has a wheel nut not get securely fastened, that comes off, they get a 4-week vacation, but we're only going to give Bubba Wallace 1. We're only going to give Chase Elliott 1. The optics of that are just not consistent and not good. Yeah. I would think that if Crafton gets a 1-race suspension for this, or if Sanchez gets a 1-race suspension for this, maybe we need to start looking at how we're policing other incidents that happen on the track as well. And to your point and, the points that others have made as well, Greg Van Alst, got injured, and Stuart Friesen had to go to the hospital as well in a separate incident. I mean, this is a very dangerous sport, arguably the most dangerous track, the fastest track that we go to running in a pack like this. I mean, it's just an all-around awful situation. I just feel so terrible for NASCAR that we have to have this conversation, but this is the lead story once again. But again, I think if they come down with a suspension here, it's not going to be unjustified.
Yeah, absolutely. Then I hope they hope they do. I mean, if his streak is ended, then good. I mean, you're going to reap what you sow here in this case, and for both ends, you need to reap what you sow here. And I know the suspension caliber is kind of inconsistent as far as vehicular intent and fist fight intent after the race, like you said there. But still, I'm curious to see. It's out of our hands now. It's curious. I'm just curious to see where NASCAR goes with it tomorrow.
And again, apologies to Matthew Owens because I know he's in the chat. I know he's watching this, but I can't help but think of Jeff Gordon at Phoenix in 2012, and something that some people said should have warranted a suspension there. Did the fact that Jeff Gordon was on track to pass Ricky Rudd in a few years, and NASCAR maybe not wanting to intervene with that consecutive start streak, did that maybe play, or is it just the fact that Jeff Gordon's a 4-time champion? Maybe he's earned the right to have an incident like that, and I would hope that we wouldn't factor that in, but we always talk about NASCAR being so consistently inconsistent. That's the only thing they're consistent on, right? Is their inconsistencies. I would hope that they look just as what happened with Bubba Wallace last year, and that kind of setting a precedent for intentional wrecks. I would hope that we look at whatever comes of this, that it sets a precedent for the future in terms of fights that get this out of hand. And I see Joe commented on you're bringing up the 79 Daytona 500. I think that's iconic for a whole, slew of reasons aside from just the fight. It was Ken Squire's call in the booth. It was the fact that, there was a massive storm on the East Coast that had everybody snowed in, and everybody was watching the first live flag-to-flag broadcast of the Daytona 500. And, again, I don't know. I wasn't around in 1979. I can't tell you for sure how I would have felt, if I had been a 24-year-old watching that in 79 as it was unfolding in real time. I'd imagine I probably wouldn't have been too thrilled with those actions, given, how you and I, Brandon, feel about fights, generally speaking. But, it's so hard to rule on these things consistently because, and again, I saw a tweet from, I'm not going to reveal who it is. I'm sure you can, if you dig deep enough, you can find it. But somebody on Twitter who has a fairly substantial following said that we've gone so soft that fights are part of a sport's DNA. And if you don't like it, you can just go watch tennis.
Right.
And, that last part, that's what bothers me the most when people use that argument, because they're the same people that are going to turn around when we get another Adam Stern tweet that says, oh, the ratings are down 8% from last year. And they're going to be like, oh, that was a great race. I wonder why aren't people watching?
Yeah.
Did you not tell people that if they don't like what they're seeing, it just bothers me so much that, again, I take no pleasure in having to have this conversation again, but we have to. We have to. It's what everybody's talking about. It's the top story, and people are firmly divided on both sides, and they don't know what's going to happen because there is no precedent. We've let these things get out of hand, and you can always look back, hindsight being 2020. But did the fact that we let some of these previous fights that didn't get to that point go in the past, has that let it get out of hand this much to the point where this is where we are now, and that only further bothers me.
Yeah, you brought up Jeff Gordon from 2012 at Phoenix. I think I didn't see NASCAR too much in the early 2010s, but I feel like if that were to go on in 2023, I think you would get a different verdict on Tuesday. For some reason, I think NASCAR officiating and NASCAR as a whole in the early 2010s is very different from where NASCAR is now in the early 2020s.
Yeah. Well, but again, Kyle Busch wrecked Ron Hornaday at Texas. He got sat down for the week, or for the rest of the weekend, rather. Carl Edwards put Brad Keselowski in the catch fence at Atlanta the year before, and he only got away with a probation. So, again, it was the boys have at it era. There was no consistency. Mm-hmm. It was a very frustrating time, I think, for race fans, to have to deal with. And again, it's not like these are a couple of starting park guys, or the, with all due respect, the Spencer Gallagher, John West Townley fight, those guys were, that fight was comical for other reasons. It didn't get nearly as bloody as this one, but those guys weren't household names. Like when you have Jeff Gordon chasing down Clint Boyer chasing down Jeff Gordon because Gordon ended his championship hopes at Phoenix, and Kyle Busch putting Ron Hornaday into the wall at Texas and ending his title hopes. Like these are big names. And Matt Crafton is a 3-time champion of the sport. He is a big name in the Truck Series. It's just an all-around awful situation.
Bringing up that Talladega fight, that really makes me want some Zaxby's right now. Come to think of it.
I
see how much that doesn't do for their sponsors?
Yeah.
Like, good. Congratulations, Gamebridge. You now have a bloody face. That's how people are seeing you right now.
Well, Andretti's going to F1 potentially, so I think that's going to be their priority at the moment. More on that on Grid Tonight, I'm sure, on Wednesday. Matthew Owens, one more comment here as well. 79 is also different because it wasn't premeditated. That's a good point. Everything about this feels very much premeditated and cheap from Crafton. So we're already over 20 minutes here. I don't want to harp on this too much. As expected, NASCAR we are expecting will have any announcements of penalties coming tomorrow, and then, like I said, probably further discussion on Grid Tonight on Wednesday as to the fallout from that. If we see anything, I would imagine at minimum, I would think that there would be a fine or probation or something based on everything that we can gather here. But again, you never know with this sport and this sanctioning body sometimes. So I think we'll just, instead of speculating, just have to wait and see what comes of it in the next 24 hours or so.
What troubles me is I don't think we'll ever, I know we'll end it here, but I don't think we'll ever know the true narrative of what actually happened. I don't think there was enough phones around the area but NASCAR is going to figure something out. I hope they can tell us a complete, truthful story with everything they've gathered, along with the suspensions or fines or what have you.
No doubt. I want to say hi to Adam Lemmeries as well. I see him here in the chat. He appreciates the background, Brandon. Of course, both of us here in New Spaces over the last few weeks, and likes the Davey Allison car and diecast that you got there. So good to see you, Adam. And one more comment sorry, Brandon, do you want to go?
Oh, yeah. Also, this gentleman back here is Tim Dillard. He's currently with the Milwaukee Brewers broadcast right now, but from the Nashville Sounds, he's affectionately known as Dim Tillard. We
nice.
like to switch the names around. Yeah.
And Joe Samaniego, the Hail Melon move from last year was a nice new viral clip for NASCAR that wasn't a fight or a deliberate wreck. Well, we can open that whole can of worms once again. I certainly still have some thoughts on that whole situation and what led to it being banned in 20. Again, like the T-Rex car, I think, right? That was amazing. That was epic. Never do that again.
Don't do that again.
And I guess
it's cemented in my mind. Chastain did a video game move, drove it into the safer barrier, and never lifted. Alex Hayden, he gets every promotion ever made from that point till the end of the season.
Yeah, I would bring up the Rick Allen call from that as well, but Matthew's watching this right now, so I will not put him through
suffer
that. Make him relive that there. We move on now. Let's talk about again another serious subject. 2 separate incidents sent both Stuart Friesen and Greg Van Alst to the hospital for further evaluation. Friesen was checked and released around 12:25 a.m. in the early hours of Sunday morning. Van Alst, meanwhile, was diagnosed with a fractured vertebrae. The news will likely end what has been a season of dreadful luck for Van Alst following his feel-good ARCA win at Daytona. In 7 combined starts in Xfinity and Trucks this season, Van Alst has failed to finish 6 of them, and his 26th place result at Talladega on Saturday was his best of the year. So really unfortunate stuff for Greg Van Alst there. Brandon, with the amount of chaos and carnage we've seen in recent years and come to expect at Talladega, I'm not here to advocate that we remove it from NASCAR's calendar entirely, but should it be on the Truck Series schedule? Is that really a track that the trucks need to be racing at? What's your take on that?
I've had too much fun with the truck. It's on the personal preference thing. I've had too much fun with the trucks at Talladega to want to rip it off the schedule, but I hate that for Greg Van Alst. And I mean, it's always going to be dangerous. There's always going to be accidents like that here and there, but is it somewhere the trucks don't need to be? That's up for consideration. But also in the same vein, if that's the case, then maybe the truck should have left Daytona years ago. For as dangerous as it is, their very first race there would almost make you think, maybe we shouldn't be here with Bodine. And back in 2000, I think it was. And there comes that year again, 2000, where Matt Crafton started at the end of the year. Yeah, and I hate that for Greg Van Alst because he went from the highest of highs this year to the lowest of lows. But Talladega, it's kind of solidified itself along with the truck schedule, in my opinion. And I don't think you should take it away just yet. If we continue to see, I hate that because, you don't want to do that. Well, if we continue to see tragic events, then maybe we'll consider it. But nah, I wouldn't go there. I think it needs to stay.
Well, Matthew,
do I have any reason to back it up? No, but
yeah. Well, Matthew agrees with you here, saying should Talladega be on truck schedule? Yes. How I think you fix this is to get rid of locking bumpers rule. I think it's the most senseless rule we have. Yeah. Should is a strong word. I don't think the truck series needs to be on super speedways. I just don't. I think the truck series, if you want to go back to its roots and how it got started in the 90s, it was predominantly on short tracks. And I understand, you want to have some companion dates and promote it alongside with the Cup Series. I get wanting to race it on 1.5 miles, but I mean, New Smyrna is right there to start the year in Florida. I think that would be a great kickoff for the Truck Series season. And then, I'll admit there's some personal bias here for me too. The very first NASCAR race I ever watched, I don't know if you know this, Brandon, it was the first ever Truck Series race at Talladega in 2006. Mark Martin won that day.
I remember that. I've seen the video, the John Deere something.
Yeah, John Deere 250. Yeah. And we nearly had we had a big accident. It could have been a lot bigger. 2 separate accidents, I guess, on the final lap happening simultaneously with Mike Wallace and Derek Cope there. So I'm sure there were some safety discussions after that one, but I can't recall. I don't have the numbers right up here in front of me. I think somebody said like 2009, 2010 was like the last time the Truck Series race at Talladega, whether it went into overtime or finished right on regulation, that it didn't have a 2-lap shootout finish the race.
Yeah, that does hurt. That is a good point for taking it away.
And again, I just feel like, and people know where I stand on overtime, and I know a lot of people disagree with that. They want to get green flag finishes no matter what. But if that's the trend, I mean, if you go a decade and a half without being able to string together more than a 2-lap run to the finish because you're constantly getting involved in some sort, like, I don't know. I just feel like that's not a very good track record. And a lot of these truck teams, this isn't a Cup Series, where these guys have Fortune 500 sponsors and unlimited budgets. Like,
right.
Think of a guy like Greg Van Alst. How much in a season, a whole season of pain here with what he's experienced in his opportunities he's gotten in the National Touring Series. And then to have something like this go out and happen to him. I mean, it's just, I hate to see it. And I feel like it's unfortunate because we have had some positive stories come out of these races, but there's also been a lot of negative ones. And I just feel like I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to be on the schedule as long as, Truck Series is around and Talladega's around. I think that ship sailed in terms of, it being a permanent part of a schedule now. Maybe they'd move it to the spring or, if they wanted to put some sort of variety in there, I don't know. But I don't think it's a necessity. At the same time, I don't see enough just yet that says this is absolutely ridiculous. We absolutely should not be here. I'm not going to go that far, but it does hurt to see, so many trucks get torn up year after year and to, not be able to get so much as a more than 2-lap shootout to the finish. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points about that, but I would also bring up the devil's advocate there. If we went to New Smyrna with the trucks, do you really want the top 2 or 3 trucks with a 4 or 5 second gap and follow the leader as your event in Florida? Because I'm pretty sure that's what you'll get in New Smyrna.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point as well. I from an entertainment perspective, I'm sure kicking off the season with the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series at Daytona would be a more popular move.
I love the World Series of Asphalt at New Smyrna, but
yeah,
come on, man. At the end of the day, they are just following each other around most of the time.
That's a completely fair point as well.
Yeah.
Matthew, following up here on the locking bumpers rule, and again, I'm in complete agreement with you on this one, Matthew. If you can't lock bumpers, you now have to continually bump. At the end of the race, the bumps are going to get bigger, thus harder to control. I think that rule creates more wrecks. I'm completely with you. I think it's like the double yellow line rule. I think it has created more controversy and problems than it's solved. And what I can't stand is when this rule gets violated, both trucks or both cars in Xfinity, because it's not a rule in Cup. Imagine that, right? It's a rule in 2 other series, but How's that for consistent inconsistency, right?
Oh wow, I have an edge there.
When this rule gets violated, both cars or trucks get penalized. And if you're the lead car or truck, I mean, what are you supposed to do in that situation, right? I mean, I get it. You're part of something that violates a rule in the rule book, but I just don't know what you're supposed to do. So that frustrates. I mean, if I'm the lead truck in a situation and somebody is locking my bumper from behind, I mean, what am I supposed to do to try to get out of that? And then they're going to penalize both of us and send us to the back of the pack or whatever. Like, I just, again, I think it creates more controversy than it solves. It causes more problems than it fixes.
Yeah, it'd be cool if Matthew Owens had the time constraints to be on this show, because that's an excellent point.
Yeah,
get rid of the bumps.
Yep, and our own Joe Samaniego chiming in here as well. After they did the first truck race at Daytona, I remember the rumors of trucks not returning, but they did, and dropped most of the short tracks. Well, again, I don't disagree. I think that ship has sailed in many respects, but hey, North Wilkesboro is back on the schedule. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show because the mods are back there this weekend. A guy can dream, right? Put the trucks at New Smyrna, put the ARCA East cars back on the Daytona backstretch in the Battle of the Beach. You remember that?
Yes.
In the early mid-2010s?
And the mods. The
mods
were there too, right?
Yeah, get the mods there too. It'd be a lot of fun, I think.
Only problem is there's no stands back there anymore, but we could.
Yeah, that is true. I did forget about that.
Kind of an issue.
Yeah. But you could set something temporary up, I'm sure.
Set up the yachts in Lake Lloyd and just all the rich people watch.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we did have a winner, believe it or not. I know we're 30 minutes into the show before we talk about that, because there was a lot to discuss from the fallout of that incident. But congratulations to Brett Moffitt. Front Row Motorsports entering a second truck for their former driver this weekend, and kind of a throwback to his paint scheme that he won the Cup Series Rookie of the Year with in 2015. So a nice homecoming for Brett Moffitt. I think the primary reason he was in this race was to be a drafting partner to his teammate Zane Smith, who, as you can see, did not fare nearly as well, ended up 32nd and had an incident on pit road. I'll get to that a little bit later on here at the end of the show. But Brandon, let's talk about Brett Moffitt here for a second. We don't know exactly what he's going to do next year. We don't know what Front Row's truck program is going to look like. They say they're bringing that truck back, but Zane Smith's moving on to Spire and Trackhouse. So is this result from Brett Moffitt an audition for 2024? Could he come back to the Truck Series and do it with Front Row? Do you think that this provides a pathway for him to do that?
I sure hope it is. And man, back in 2019, like, Brett Moffitt is such a 2019 guy to talk about, because he was on top of the world pre-COVID, and I really thought he was I thought he was the guy. I thought he was going to be progressing up the ladder like nobody's business. But I feel like he's kind of hit kind of a stump there with AM Racing in the Xfinity Series. He's there, but not really unsure about next year. I hope this is an audition for him, and that second truck there for Front Row, I learned that it was just used to help Zane Smith with his playoff run, and so that idea went out the window very early. So they ended up the experiment truck rather was out there to win the race, which is really cool. It also shows just the power of Front Row Motorsports is one-off stuff, and you can look at the Cup Series and see that too with Riley Herbst on Sunday as well. And I kind of wish he was a better pusher, but he did what he could. Anyway, Brett Moffitt, I really hope this is an audition for him. That's really cool to see him walk out with a win. And with that seat opening up, that this is your time to shine, and he's got to get something out of that. I don't see many times in my memory where you win and nothing happens for you the next year.
Yeah. Well, I'm confident he will, excuse me. I'm confident he will have something, going forward in 24. And I think of Brett Moffitt kind of as, I think people might forget, he has a Truck Series championship, and he's, been a part of a series for a long time now. And now he's gone on to Xfinity and maybe tried to work his way up the ladder a little bit, but, hasn't been as visible in the last couple of years. I mean, it doesn't get much more visible than winning a Truck Series race at Talladega. Maybe this is, a sign that, with this seat opening up, who better to put in that truck than a veteran like Brett Moffitt, who, is going to get you results. And, we'll see what 2024 might look like from there. But I think he would be an excellent choice for sliding into that seat that's been vacated by Zane Smith moving up the ladder. All right, I see we've got one more comment here before we move on from Canes Cats Heat 305. Good evening. Thank you for the good content on All Racing Series. Good to see you. I think that's a new face here in the chat, at least on the Encore show. So we appreciate you tuning in. Encourage you to stick around for the rest of the show and go back and watch some of our previous streams as well. We have a lot of fun here on the Encore show.
I'm going to predict that's Carolina Hurricanes, Carolina. Well, no, what are the Cats? Nashville Cats is all I could think of. Arena football, Miami Heat, 305 sprints. Is this what you are a fan of? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Wildcats. Now I don't know how many Wildcats are there. There's a lot of
just a few dozen, right?
Sports. Yeah. All right, or maybe Miami Hurricanes, right? I think the 305 is a Miami reference.
Oh,
yeah. So
there you go. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, we move on now. Let's talk about a series we don't always cover on the show, but whenever they're at a notable track or something notable happens in the series, we like to talk about the modifieds here on Grid Live Encore. Congratulations to Matt Hirschman taking the win over a couple of usual suspects up there, Ron Silk and Justin Bonsignor. A 38-car field that included Daytona 500 winner Ryan Newman and NASCAR champion and Hall of Famer Bobby Labonte. Unfortunately, he got caught up in a crash there late in the race, finished in 33rd. But Brandon, obviously, we've all talked about North Wilkesboro, how great it is to see that track back on the schedule. How great is it to see the modifieds getting involved in this racetrack revival here?
Man, the ground pounders at North Wilkesboro. Never thought it would ever happen again. Never thought anything would happen there. It's just cool to see that track do anything. And the Whelen Modified Tour there was a great show. They're such fast machines, but Wilkesboro somehow made them look slow, at least on the camera. A lot of multi-groove racing going on. The lead didn't change too much, but it was a fun show. And of course, seeing Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman in there, Newman able to stick in till the end of the race, and always hard to pass. But I'm glad he's having fun there in the Modified Tour, and seeing Hirschman get the win, Bonsignor up there as always. It seemed like a really fun time there, and I really wish I had bought a ticket, but schedule and travel doesn't always work, and maybe one day I'll be at Wilkesboro.
Well, I think Matthew Owens picked it up for us there. Probably Miami Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and Miami Heat. That would be consistent with the region, and
that works.
Looks like we got a confirmation on that.
Can confirm.
Yeah. And here we go, back and forth. The Florida Panthers, who eliminated the Carolina Hurricanes last season. I was at the game. The goal was right in front of me. Lifelong dream to see that happen. And Matthew coming back here. Friendly rivalry here going on in the chat with some NHL teams here. Hope we meet again this season with a different result. And then a question here from Canes Cat Heat 305. Would you ever consider doing a ranking on junior series drivers like karting and F4 to F2, USF Pro 2000, USF Ladder, Indy Next, etc.? You got to talk to Joe Samaniego on that one, because I would, if we were going to do that, I would want it to be consistent with what he does with the grid ranking. But again, I just think it's hard enough what we do, to rank drivers across different disciplines, as different as rally and MotoGP and, open wheel and stock cars. I think once you get into the junior series, like, trying to rank an ARCA driver or a truck series driver against, somebody in USF Pro 2000 or, a Formula 4 car over in Europe, I think that would just, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I'm sure there's some sort of metric out there, but I just feel like there's even less overlap between, maybe the Greg Van Alst of the world, for example, and, some literal 13 and 14-year-olds trying to work their way up the European single-seater ladder. But who knows? As we continue to grow here, who knows what the future holds for the grid ranking, and maybe that's something we would consider in the future. Well, while we're on the subject of North Wilkesboro, Brandon, before we move on to the ARCA recaps here, we did get some word it's going to affect the All-Star race next year, and whatever the future holds for North Wilkesboro, it does look like they are finally going to bite the bullet and go ahead and repave the surface. And credit to everybody at North Wilkesboro for allowing us to get a season in with the original racing service from back in the day. I cannot believe they were able to pull that off with how rough a shape that track was in while it was inactive. But Brandon, I think I could tell from your gesture there, but I'll ask the question anyway. Are you in favor of this recently announced repave of North Wilkesboro Speedway?
Oh man, that racing surface before they came in and started restoring it looked worse than some Tennessee back roads. I mean, it was not looking very hot. A lot of pothole looking things, and they put enough patches on it just to make it work for the All-Star race. And just to applaud SMI. There's a lot of things to applaud SMI for. Honestly, they do a fantastic job. Hospitality, building, just about everything they touch is just really honest, great work. And North Wilkesboro is just one of these big magnum opuses here lately of just what that means. The track looked great for the All-Star race, and just really glad that they were able to be on the surface that Darrell Waltrip and Richard Petty drove on. That's just cool that you're able to make that happen. But yeah, 1 year is enough. It's got to go. It probably was not going to last another go at it. And I'm surprised it made it through the All-Star race and the modifieds. But yeah, it's time to give this thing a fresh look. And it's known to not help racing some places, but who knows? Changing up the asphalt might help the racing.
And on that note, I would, encourage fans here, exercise patience. Good things come to those who wait. It might not be great racing for a couple of years. The next gen package is not very good on short tracks. We saw that with how Kyle Larson put on an absolute clinic at the All-Star race this year. Give it some time. Give NASCAR some time to figure out the car. Give the North Wilkesboro, give their new surface some time to age a little bit. And then I think, we might see something different and something a little bit better than what we might see in 24 and 25 in the first couple of years of his new surface. But I think I'm with you. It was time. It was going to get to the point where we were having potholes come back up, and we're going to have to red flag the races for chunks of the surface breaking apart. We again, credit to the grounds crew there for making it work for a year, but we got it done the first year back. It was an incredible throwback. Now, if this track is really going to have a future place in the sport, let's show that commitment by actually taking the time and money and effort to give it a fresh repave here.
Yeah, it sure could use it, and I'm glad it's going to happen.
Yeah. All right, we'll catch up on the chat here, and then we'll get into ARCA. You guys are the only people I've seen with a ranking like this. I'm not a NASCAR or MotoGP fan, mostly a Junior Series and IndyCar. I think that Super Formula / F1 fan with the rankings are the reason I've been watching. Well, thank you, Kane's Cat Heat 305. We really appreciate it, and hope you stick around. Like I said, for we'll have grid tonight later in the week, and then more coverage throughout the rest of the season every weekend here until we get to the end of the year. To see how these highly rated drivers are, and looking at past rankings, looks like they hold weight, because look at Scotty Mack and SVG. And yes, look at what those two supercars guys are doing now in IndyCar, and potentially with SVG coming over to NASCAR here. I think maybe that, validates the grid ranking a little bit. The best drivers in the world being able to get into different machines, different equipment, different forms of motorsports, and being able to still have success. I think that is a testament to the talent of those two drivers that you've mentioned here. And yes, Super Formula there. Excuse me. Matthew Owens saying great news week between North Wilkesboro and Indianapolis. Yes, of course, the Brickyard 400 is back. I still wish the Xfinity Series were at IRP instead, but hey, one miracle at a time, right? We can. Yeah.
And also,
never coming back. That ship is sailed. Let's just get the dozer. Let's forget about the road course, and let's never have to give it a second thought, right?
Yeah, and also it's in the very public rumor mill right now of Dale Jr. shouting that Roval is not coming back next year to Charlotte ovals, and also Iowa.
Yeah. Well, Iowa too. That news coming out again. Hopefully, the schedule comes out this week. I think enough dominoes have fallen at this point that I think it's imminent. I will say this about the Roval real quick before we move on. And I've said this, on other shows before and in, back and forth discussions. I think the Roval was always supposed to be a temporary fix. We didn't have enough road courses on the schedule for a lot of fans, but we also had contracts in with the current tracks that were on the schedule that we had to honor. So what do? We take the infield road course at Charlotte. We get it up to specifications to justify hosting a cup race and everything, and make sure that that's all good to go. And then we can kind of have a third road course race and give the fans what they want until we can add Road America, which I hope is only gone for a year, because that's a great track. We can add, a street course now with Chicago and, some of the other road courses that are in this country. I think that those are the tracks that I would rather see on the schedule. Maybe Mid-Ohio, could get some cup discussions at some point. That's what I'd rather see than the Charlotte Roval, particularly because of what the next gen car looks like on 1.5 miles compared to road courses. I think it's kind of a reverse actually of what it was during the Gen 6 era. So, I would hardly be heartbroken. I assume Dale Jr. is more in the know than you or I are, Brandon, with all his connections and everything. But I'm not going to shed a tear if the Roval falls off the schedule, as much as I think it's created some memorable moments over the years, as much as I am not usually a fan of going to the same track twice in a single season. I think the Roval experiment has potentially 6 years in. Maybe we could say it's run its course here.
I can't believe it's been 6 years. I feel like we just ran the inaugural one. Great gray hairs up here. But yeah, Marcus Smith is a genius. That's all I got to say. A genius for using your own resources and shaking up the schedule and making an impact the first year like it did. But yeah, it's we may know this as the infield road course era of NASCAR around the pandemic or around one of pandemic. I don't even know, but Daytona, Charlotte, just the infield time of the sport where that will phase out and we'll get to permanent circuits.
Yeah, Coda. I knew there was one I was forgetting there. We got Circuit of the Americas on the schedule now. We did the Daytona road course. Again, I think that was more a pandemic thing, just because Florida opened up a little bit sooner.
No California.
But again, I think we're at a point now. It was a crime that the Brickyard 400 ever went away. I'm on the record talking about how much that race had lost its luster. And didn't feel quite as special as it once was. But I think that was one of those situations where you don't really know what you got until it's gone. And I don't think it ever, of course, some changes needed to be made to bring people back into the stands and make the race feel like a big deal again. But, the fact that they killed it off for 3 years and, gave us the infield road course race again, anytime you get the kids to bricks, no disrespect to AJ Allmendinger, Tyler Reddick, and Michael McDowell, who won those 3 races. Any win at Indy special, but there's something different, I think, about winning on the oval. And I hate that Kevin Harvick did not get a chance to, add another Brickyard 400 to his resume or, before his retirement here.
Yeah, that was his race.
All the other active drivers have lost 3 years of that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see the race back. Sorry, Brandon, were you going to say something else there before?
I was just saying that was Kevin Harvick's race. And it is a crime. It was ever gone. And I think this Gen 7 is going to pack a punch, an unexpected punch on the Brickyard 400 when whatever tire compound Goodyear comes up with this new car. My expectations are high. We'll see if those are broken or not. Yeah,
I'm very much looking forward to it. I have high expectations based on how the next gen is raced at other tracks. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do there with that package. So we'll just have to wait and see. One more comment from Kane's Cats Heat 305. You both also watch a lot of racing. What has been the most competitive and best racing series you've watched this season? That is an excellent question. I'm always tempted to say IndyCar, but I think Alex Palou just ran away with that one last year and clinched the championship a race early. I don't know. Part of me's tempted to say NASCAR just because of the parity, but my big three are Formula One, IndyCar, and NASCAR, and obviously Verstappen has just been running away with everything in Formula One here. So I don't think it can be that one. I don't think it can be IndyCar just because of how dominant Palou was. And I think, Formula E has a lot of parity involved as well. I must confess, I don't follow that one as closely as the other three, but I'll tell you this. I think there's a lot of, for all the flaws and problems that I think NASCAR has at the moment, parity and competition isn't one of them. The fact that you had a regular season champion in Martin Truex Jr. who was in danger of not making it out of the first round in the postseason. My personal thoughts on the playoffs aside, I do think that speaks to the strength of the playoff field and the strength of his competitors, that, he was the best driver throughout the first 26 races. And all it took was a couple of bad races for him to be in danger of not even making it out of the first round. There's a lot of competition in NASCAR right now. So that would probably be my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of parity going on, Canes, all over the place. You either have a lot of parity or you have the drivers running away with it in those different series. But it really has been hard to tell. Any other year, I would have told you IndyCar as well.
Yeah. Well, and in fairness, I think, Alex Palou he was always dominant. He was always, I think his worst finish was 8th this year. But, there were still plenty of drivers, that got up front that, won a race and, showed speed and competition there. So, and again, very competitive Indianapolis 500 as always with Joseph Newgarden, getting Marcus Ericsson there at the end. So, and that's not to say IndyCar was bad this year by any means. I'm sure it would have been nice to see the championship go down in the last race, but you can't argue about Alex Palou being a deserving champion. That's for sure. Here we go. Super Formula E, very, very competitive. Three-way battle for the title this month. Well, that's good to hear. Again, Super Formula, I don't hardly follow at all. It's hard to get coverage here in the United States.
Not really a way to watch it outside of Japan, at least in the U.S.
The main thing I know about Super Formula is that's where, sometimes the GP2 or F2 champions have gone to spend a year because there's no F1 seat for them right away. Like I think Pierre Gasly did that, maybe Stoffel Van Dorn, if I recall correctly as well. So, but yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about the series. I hear it's very, very competitive. Again, I just wish there was an easier way to access that here in the States.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we move on now. Finally, tonight, let's recap a couple of ARCA races that took place this weekend real quick. And we'll start with the main national tour at Salem. Stop me if you've heard this before. Jesse Love won the race.
Stop.
Again.
You told me to stop you. Sorry.
There you go.
Jesse Verstappen wins again.
Yeah, there you go. I guess we can. Yeah, we got Alex Verstappen. We've got Jesse Verstappen here in the ARCA Menards series. But yeah, Jesse Love. What more can you say? 10th win of the year. All he needed to do to clinch the championship was take the green flag, and obviously he did much more than that. He clinched the championship in style by winning the race. Love's closest competition, William Sawalich, fell out of contention after hitting the wall while battling Love for the lead. Sawalich lost 5 laps in the pits while repairs were being made, but was still able to finish 6th in a race of very high attrition. Everybody from 10th on back ended the race in the garage, including Frankie Muniz, who continues to suffer from even more bad luck. He had a mechanical issue that required repairs for about 50 laps. He was able to get back on the track and log laps to gain some more experience. And then once it became apparent that he climbed as high as he was going to get, he pulled off the track again in closing laps and ended the night with a 10th place result. So hopefully he can finish the season strong in his one last race here, and then we'll see what he has planned for 2024 moving forward. Hopefully he can turn his luck around next season as well. Now on to the ARCA Menards Series West. Let's talk about this situation here. It's an unfortunate situation for Landon Lewis and for the championship battle. Caden Honeycutt won on his series debut. That was Landon Lewis's car at number 17, McGowan and Cook injury. Landon Lewis is out of that car at least for this race and potentially for the rest of the year, probably for the rest of the year. Some conflicting reports as to what exactly happened there. Some say he left in his own accord. Others say that that's not the case. Whatever the case is, Caden Honeycutt was in the car this weekend, ended up taking the win. Landon Lewis and his camp do say that they're working on opportunities to get back to the track before the season ends, but his championship hopes have now evaporated with him missing this race. And with Trevor Huddleston's mechanical issues, that all but guarantees that Sean Higurani will win the championship with 3 races remaining in the West Series season. So an unfortunate premature end to what was shaping up to be a very close battle between those two. And again, unless Sean Higurani completely falls apart and Trevor Huddleston goes out and practically has to win out the rest of the season with what the point margins are. I believe Tyler Reif is up there as well, level with him for second in the standings at the moment. Higurani looks like he's going to be your champion-elect in the ARCA Menards Series West. And let's catch up on the chat here once again. Kane's Cat Heat 305. I'm glad you're so active in the chat tonight and helping participate in the show here. Rio Hirakawa, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, who just signed with McLaren, is also in that series. He's incredible. And then a question here, what is the junior series of NASCAR? That is probably how I will start liking it more by following the drivers. The immediate junior series, I guess you could say, is probably Xfinity. That's the one level below the Cup Series. It's where you see most of the young stars have their final steps, their final proving grounds, if you will, before they get into the Cup Series. You see some of that in trucks. Again, the Truck Series kind of started as a veterans tour, I would say, for drivers who never really made it at the Cup level or maybe only made it for a couple of years. But, whatever reason, rides just didn't work out. They wanted a spot to continue to race. That's what the Truck Series has been historically. But over the years, it has kind of become another step on the development ladder. And then ARCA, again, is another mix of the two. It's used primarily by some teams as a proving ground for young drivers in their teens and early 20s trying to work up through the ladder. But you also have independents who don't have nearly the budgets of the top teams that are just out there because That's what they love to do, is race. And that gives them an opportunity to do that without having to splurge on the budget for a Cup Series program. And, okay, I guess this is a question for Matthew Owens, so hopefully he's still watching here. But I would say Homestead is a fantastic track, and there we go. Matthew's got the answer right there. One of the best tracks on the tour. High banks, 8 different lanes to choose from. Big-time tire wear, all that creates great racing. Couldn't agree more. I wish it was still the season finale. No disrespect to Phoenix, but I think if we're going to have a format like this, I think Homestead, I think historically speaking, put on better racing than what we've seen at Phoenix, especially with how chaotic and, dare I say, much of a lottery those restarts can seem to get there. Not a fan of Phoenix being the final race in this playoff era that we're in here.
Well, technically, it still is the finale for one official NASCAR series. That's the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series, but take that as you will.
I guess that counts. Where does esports, play in the whole? Yeah,
it's sanctioned by NASCAR. That's all. It's a discipline, and
that's
they
fair.
put thousands of hours into it. Yeah, that is what it is.
Yeah, and I'm with you on this, Canes, as well. I've been itching for IndyCar to go to Homestead, but NASCAR won't allow it. I'm very frustrated by that. I'm very frustrated that Texas is off the IndyCar schedule. We had that whole discussion last week as well. IndyCar needs more ovals, and I don't totally absolve all the blame from Roger Penske here. I think it's been 4 or 5 years. The pandemic excuse has certainly run its course by now. We definitely need more ovals on the schedule, but at the same time, I think NASCAR could do a little bit more to make it easier for IndyCar to go back to some of these tracks that they raced at not so long ago. And Matthew Owens agrees here. It definitely should be the finale. Great track, and a track we only go to once, which I think is big for a finale. Absolutely. All right, well, coming up on an hour here, Brandon, thank you as always for your time. Before we go, what is your one shining moment from this weekend in motorsports?
Well, this week I had to give it to the one that kept the peace, or at least attempted to anyway. That's Truck Series driver Corey Roper. He's not there in the full season, but front stretches Dalton Hopkins was able to get a word there with Corey about his take of the Nick Sanchez, Matt Crafton debacle. And it was in the midst of all the head shaking and just frustration and disappointment. To be clear, I was not angry per se, just really disappointed with two drivers that I want the best for, and this is obviously not the best for them, not the best for the sport, but we've already covered that. Corey Roper came in and tried to keep the peace, and so he gets my one shining moment.
I want to give my one shining moment to a crew member, Charles Plank from Zane Smith's crew in the Truck Series. Did you see what happened to him in the middle of the race with Zane Smith coming into the pits?
He put a dent in the truck.
He got absolutely blindsided. But I heard on Dave Moody's show this afternoon, apparently he's a former college football player. Definitely showed with how he braced for that hit and was able to bounce right up. And again, I'll tell you, I hope he's doing well, because I know adrenaline is certainly a hell of a drug here, and I'm sure that played no small role in allowing him to bounce back up so quickly and make sure he was able to finish that stop and take it like a champ. I hope he's feeling okay. I'm sure it probably hit him a little bit more.
The next day, he's probably, where am I?
Yeah. But all credit to him, and credit to, while we have a moment as well, I think the crew members are, the unsung heroes of this sport, because we could not function without them. We could not hold these races without them. And they are taking just as much of a risk every weekend as the drivers are. The pits are a dangerous place. We saw it in the Cup Series race with the fuel can that caught on fire. I believe that came off Ty Gibbs's car, if I recall correctly, or Ty Dillon's if you were in the NBC booth there. Hopefully Matthew's still in the chat watching this. But, in all seriousness, these guys, what they do is very, very dangerous. And we shouldn't take it for granted and shouldn't take their hard work for granted. And all credit to Charles Plank for taking it like a champ and finishing that stop. And, I just can't speak highly enough of these guys' work ethics, because, it is a very dangerous job just as much as driving the cars are.
They're athletes.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. And a lot of them come from, college football. Maybe these are guys that, had dreams to go play in the NFL and, maybe got there for a year or two or didn't get there at all, but played in college and are still stronger and more athletic than 99.99% of the population.
Yeah.
That's
And
what
also-
you want in your pit crews, and it's a great second career for him.
We need more pit crew challenges than we get to spotlight the names of the men and women on pit wall.
Yeah.
I think they could use a lot more recognition.
Yeah, no doubt there.
Oh, Rick.
Oh, Rick, yes. And one more comment here from Keynes. Texas was my first IndyCar race last year. It's what got me hooked to the series. Yeah, I mean, that just echoes the point. I think it's very unfortunate that, again, I hope that's just a one-year thing. I hope that that's a schedule conflict for next year and that we can get that back in 25. Because as critical as I've been of the track for its NASCAR races, the IndyCar race this year was phenomenal. The last couple races there have been phenomenal. And I think that that's what best suits the track at this point. And it's unfortunate that NASCAR wanting to shuffle that date around, we believe, again, we'll get confirmation whenever the schedule comes out, but we believe that is the primary reason why it's not going to be on the schedule next year, and I think that's a shame. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for being so active in the chat tonight and giving us more stuff to talk about. If you liked what you saw, please follow us on social media, Twitter, X, I guess I have to say now that is Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, most importantly right here on YouTube. Help us on our journey to 1,000 subscribers and beyond. Again, if you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after the show and consider joining our Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in Grid Network and helping keep us on the air throughout 2023 and beyond. Our long-term goal of $500 per month will allow us to begin attending races on site on a more regular basis, and that expands our coverage for you, the viewers. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit Buy Me a Coffee. Link to that in the description box below. You can buy a coffee for your favorite honor or talent. Any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet. Or if you're watching on YouTube, we now have the super chats enabled as well. Now on Wednesday, don't miss Grid Tonight with Kobe Lambeth, Josh Birch, and Matt White. Women in Motorsports is back. We'll be taping that later this week. That'll premiere likely on Friday morning or sometime this weekend. You'll see that when that comes about. And of course, you can always stay tuned for more Grid Live coverage throughout this upcoming weekend. Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off for this evening?
Well, we may be seeing the swan song of the Charlotte Roval next weekend. So whatever we get, even if that is true or not, I hope it's a great race all around for Xfinity and Cup. And as far as where the rest of the world is, I'm not too sure. But it's going to be another great weekend.
It certainly is. And again, I hope that if this is it for the Roval, that it goes out with a bang, but not too much of a bang, if you know what I mean. I hope we get some great racing. I hope we get a great finish. Yeah. I hope we don't have a sign or a billboard fall off the wall and onto a racing surface, completely changing the outcome of NASCAR's postseason. That I don't want to see again. But I hope we get some good racing, and I hope that it's a successful weekend for everybody at the track.
For sure. And I hope someone gets their yard sign carried with a car and we get one of those again.
Hey, if it's going to happen, I guess, it's a great return on investment. You get a lot more TV time than you initially paid for. So there you go.
That's the idea.
At least something is going to come of it. For Brandon Crossland, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. As always, have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.